when she was a baby, her parents decided to paint her room because they wanted to make it a nicer room for her. And they scraped the old paint off the walls, unknowingly leaving lead dust all over the floor. We'll also learn about how kids get exposed to lead and what we can do about it through this series. So we're going to go to the next slide. Lashana, unfortunately, was not tested for lead by her doctor until she turned 3, although the doctor should have offered her a test at age 1 or 2. And I know many of you have confronted this issue. She now has a lead level of 25 micrograms per deciliter, which is very high and very worrisome, which is a lot of lead, and it is very dangerous for her. If her lead levels continue to go up, she might have to go into the hospital for treatment. We'll talk more about the impacts of lead in our slides later. Luckily, her parents, like all of you, have learned about lead poisoning and began cleaning their house weekly, improving hand washing, and giving her good nutrition. So her lead levels are coming down. Plus, her parents, like you guys, became advocates and are helping to make local laws stronger and better enforced. So that's why we're here today, to make sure the Lashanas of the world and the Knoxes of the world end up healthy and brain healthy and don't have the same story that Lashana had. Although in her story, she's getting better and she'll be good. But it's because of her parents' diligence and action. So with that, I'll turn it back to Rebecca.
Great. And I believe that Abigail, you're up next.
So kind of doing some of the groundwork of lead. So you may or may not know this, but we always know, as Mary Sue said, that there's a lot of facts and figures. And so I think just if you're new to it, great, you'll probably learn a lot. If you're not, hopefully this will be information that you're reminded of to continue to use. So the first, if you see the map on the right-hand side, you can see that lead is a pretty big issue throughout the whole state. So we have the 5th highest number of lead poisoned children in the US, which is wild. And up to 20% of 1 and 2-year-olds have elevated blood lead levels in some communities. And you'll learn about what elevated blood lead levels kind of is. But basically no level is, any amount of it is bad. So just know that. You can, in the map, if you look, as the bubbles get bigger, particularly like you can see in the Detroit area, in bigger cities in Kent County, in Flint, but really the lower half of that. You can go to the next slide. So what is lead? So lead is it's an element found in the earth that's soft, and it just appears. So it was used in kind of highlights, it like makes things shiny. That's why they use it in paint, but it's actually really poisonous and impacts the nervous system and the brain. So why we talk about it with children is because as a children, especially between 0 and 5 is developing, the like brain pathways and everything that's forming, it can impact and stop that, which really impacts development of a child. So any amount is not safe, and it's irreversible. So this is kind of one of the big things, and you'll see there's multiple ways in which people can come in contact with lead. So the biggest culprit is lead paint and dust and chips. Wow, that was a tongue twister. So what that means is homes built before 1978, when lead paint was banned, right? They put it in there because it made it shiny and pretty, and then they realized the paint chips. So especially around like windowsills and doors where there's a lot of friction, so you're opening and closing, or like this, is why around those areas where lead contamination happens a lot. It also happens in the soil. So if you're at home on the outside, it can get in the soil, and it never really goes away. So that's why having grass and non-bare soil around the home is important. It can also be in water, which comes from pipes, which that's been pretty big lately, and replacing that, the lead infrastructure, the lead pipe infrastructure has been a hot topic, understandably so. I think some of the smaller ones where people may not know as much, and this often comes because there's not as much regulation in other countries. So sometimes when people come in with like cosmetics and foodware, like bowls and ceramics, lead can be found in there. Again, it like makes things pretty, you know, it kind of is a double-edged sword. It looks pretty and then it's really dangerous. And spices and jewelry and ammunition and fishing, like fishing equipment, which it still exists. I love, Sarah put in there that she said to everyone know that lead can taste sweet, and that's why kids will want to continue to eat it. So, you know, as kids pick it up and put it in their mouth, it tastes good. But it's even more dangerous. Go to the next one. So thanks, Jotel. See ya. So where do we come in contact? We kind of talked a little bit. If you start, we'll start from the list at the top left where it says interior and exterior windows. So I kind of talked about that. If you are living in an older home and the windows haven't been replaced, I think people relate it to like alligator skin is what it kind of looks like. So you'll see it chipping, but especially those like high friction areas where the paint will start to chip and become dust. And then the scary part too is that you can't always see it because it's so small that you can still inhale, a child can still inhale it and be toxic even if you can't see it. Then you go down, so some jewelry has it, especially with the paint. And then the next one is exterior paint, including trim and porches. So again, you'll see the like crackling of it. You can usually see that on old homes. Then the doors and door frames. Floors, I can't see floors near, I can't see the bottom. Floors.
Windows.
Okay, thank you. So floors near windows. So when you, not only the windowsill or the door, but then the paint chips fall and they'll lay on that horizontal surface and can stay there. Then if you cross over, so the water, and we know that was a really, right, like we know about Flint and we know about other areas that because of that lead piping, then cosmetics, interior paint, food, foodware and spices, and soil. So some of those we kind of touched on a little bit, but yeah, lead comes up a lot more than we realize. I think this is the next person.
Yeah, so this is a portion that I'll go ahead and go over. So how do we come in contact with lead? Special considerations. When it comes to children, it's usually hand and mouth transfer, playing in bare soil. That's never good. Chewing on window seals, crawling on floors, more interaction with their surroundings is how children primarily get lead poisoning. But there's also other things to consider. Workplace environment. There's and hobbies. There's, you know, workplace environments and hobbies. I'm just moving one of the screens over so I can see everything. And you know that in those workplace environments, there's construction, car repair, mining, plumbing, printing, military or police workforce involving firearms, home renovation, painting, pottery, glazing, fishing. You don't stop and think of all these, but all these have lead particles or may have lead particles in them. So you have to consider that. And we'll go over things that you can do to help prevent some of these work hobbies, work placement environments and hobbies coming into the home as well. Next slide. When lead enters the body, first and foremost, you know, the image with, you know, the pregnant mom, the belly, first it starts there. We want to make sure that as a pregnant mom that you're eating healthy and nutrition wise, because it can be passed on during your pregnancy. And then from there, breastfeeding. Stored for long periods of time in parts of the body. Lead will store in like teeth, bones. Lead can be released from teeth and bones when the body doesn't get enough minerals like calcium and iron from food. So you want to make sure that you're building up your immune system and eating lots of calcium and iron, high-rich foods. Often no visible effects. Blood lead levels tests are only seen or only detected when you get your child tested for lead. So it's very, very important that you do so, and being mindful to get your children tested. Moving on to the next slide. What are the health impacts of lead? For young children, there's learning disabilities, ADHD and behavioral issues, decreased IQ, calcium deficiency, and it can also cause things in adults and older children. Osteoporosis, thinning of the bones, permanent damage to the brain, bones, kidneys and heart, anemia, reproductive issues, reduced problem-solving skills. And so these are things that you may not notice. And later on in life, you know, you might have some of these issues and you never know. It could have been the cause of lead. And the only way to know that is, again, getting children tested early on so that we can stop the process from evolving. Next slide. Sources of lead exposure. So we know that for many, many years, pre-1978, they used lead-based paint just because it lasted so long. That's why it's everywhere in the homes. So for many years, lead was used in paint, metal pipes, gasoline, mining, commercial and industrial operations, and sometimes you can still find it in some of those commercial industrial, operations. Lead paint was banned in 1978, and then leaded gasoline was banned in 1996. Exposure still possible from paint and gasoline residue. So again, some of these you might find even in demolitions of even rundown commercial buildings or old gas stations. It's just mindful to be aware of that, because you'd want to stay away from those areas or not be outside on those type of days where it's windy or they're doing a demolition. You want to keep your windows closed, kind of stay inside, because it's in the environment that lead dust can, travel, and making sure that afterwards, and we'll give you those tips, but just making sure you kind of wet everything down and then clean, wipe everything in the home as well for dust. And moving on to the next slide. So as Abigail had mentioned, it looks like alligator paint. Here's a couple images of alligator paint. This is what we're talking about. So a lot of times you'll find this on interior, but even the exterior of windows, doors, your porches, if they were made of wood, sometimes even the whole house. So again, this is what that would look like. And this is what we want to be, bring awareness of. So cracked or peeling or deteriorating lead paint that you can find on walls, renovations disturbing lead paint could spread lead dust. Lead paint can contaminate household dust and nearby soil. Contaminated soil can be tracked indoors, consumed by hand and mouth transfer, and contaminate plants grown nearby. So it's very important as well on maybe a demolition day of a house that's a few, maybe a few blocks away, and you're aware of that demolition occurring, to cover your garden, with plastic. So none of that lead dust would, travel onto your plants. Watering down the grass, making sure that any lead particle dust kind of seeps in down to the soil, and at least it's covered with grass on top. Just a couple tips that you can do. And then you don't want to disturb the dry paint or flake it off anymore. You want to make sure it's nice and wet and moist, or, you know, really damp before even picking it up to put it in a plastic bag and dispose of it. Just because we want to make sure it's nice and wet and none of that dust is spreading. Next slide. Lead in homes. So young children are at greatest risk of lead poisoning in the home. Pregnant women and unborn children are also at great risk. Most exposure today occurs in older homes with deteriorating lead paint. Most children are exposed to lead dust from normal hand to mouth activity. Rather they're eating, you know, paint chips. But I will say, and someone did put into the comment or the chat box, yes, it does have a sweet taste to children. So, again, you know, sometimes you can't see it. It's like a grain of salt. So again, a little bit can do a lot of damage. So we just want to make sure that sometimes it's invisible. So we want to make sure we do that wet clean and wet wipe as much as possible and have them wash their hands often. About 70% of Michigan's housing stock was built before 1978 when lead paint was banned. Next slide. Preventing lead exposure in and around the home. So that's one thing I want to say. We can prevent it. We can prevent it. And here's some tips on how we can prevent it. First and foremost, test for lead in the homes built before 1978. And also, you know, make sure all paint is in good condition, not chipped, not peeling or, you know, deteriorating. Learn and use lead safe practices when doing work that disturbs paint. Wet clean all surfaces weekly or as often as possible, especially windowsills and window wells. So this means your door frames, your floors. You also, you know, a table, you know, you might want to dust off your table or your countertop. That's a wet clean weekly. So all surfaces, just make sure you do a little light mist and you wipe it down with a disposable rag or paper towel, because in that way you're getting rid of it and you're not going to just spread it right back on that table. So we, you know, emphasize using disposable paper towel or rag. When vacuuming, use a HEPA filter vacuum. If you don't have a HEPA filter vacuum, you may mist the carpet with soapy water and then vacuum. One thing, and the reason we recommend a HEPA filter, because if you use a regular vacuum, they don't have that HEPA filter that will catch the most smallest microgram of particles, that lead dust will just spread right back out from the vacuum and right back onto the floor. So if you don't have one, please wet your carpet with a spray bottle, soapy water, and then that way the dust isn't spreading up or kicking back up. And wash children's hands and toys often. And then one thing I want to mention is, you know, get your children tested. That's really important as well. Okay, next slide. And I think we have a next presenter.
Yes. Okay. So sources of lead in the environment. The containment of soil from gasoline has been used before 1996. Old lead pipes, infrastructure, air dust, contaminated by industrial work, residential demolition, as has already kind of been shared, mines and smelters containment nearby soil and water. So I think the one that we might see a little more prevalent in a lot of our communities is the residential demolition as homes are being built or as businesses are being torn down. So just being more mindful of that and just being aware of the environment. And I know it's not always readily accessible to the community, but just kind of being aware of that. Next slide, please. So sources of lead exposure. These are products that can cause lead exposure. Food, so imported foods. This one was really interesting to me, especially because a lot of my food is imported. So when we look at spices, turmeric, chili powder, paprika, masala, hot pepper, these are all spices that you typically find in Middle Eastern cuisine. So that was something for me that I was actually shocked with. But also when you're looking at imported foods, looking at the cans, gardening, food grown in contaminated soil or air, foodware, so anything from imported ceramic ware. Jewelry can also have lead and expose folks to lead. Externally applied cosmetics, so lipstick, lip gloss, eyeshadows, blush, shampoos, lotions. Something else that I was also kind of shocked with was kuhl, which is again within the Middle Eastern community. You do see it a lot. So these are all different. They all contain a different level of exposure to lead. So just kind of being more mindful of that, as well as alternative medicine, and then ammunition and fishing tackle. Next slide, please. So lead in soil. So this is something that, I mean, anyone can find, right? So being contaminated by lead paint on the exterior of a home, as it's been shared previously. Building demolitions can have contaminants surrounding the soil, residue of lead gas line, and then preventing lead soil poisoning from contaminated soil, I apologize for that, is covering soil around the home with grass or mulch. Keep soil within 400 feet of a demolition site covered. If soil is contaminated, only grow food in raised beds with fresh soil. Wash children's toys and hands often. Avoid transfer from soil into the home. And again, if you're not aware of what the soil situation is in your, for instance, if you want to have a backyard garden in your backyard, building a raised bed may be more beneficial. Bring in your own soil just to be on the safe side. I would highly recommend that. Next slide, please. Okay, and then lead in drinking water. As we know, this is something that affects a lot of our communities. So lead can enter water in a leaching form, so pipes, faucets, solder. Can be found in school drinking water. Boiling water does not get rid of lead. Adding a filter to a kitchen faucet can help remove lead from drinking water. Let the faucet run for a few minutes before drinking, cooking, or making bottles to help flush out lead. Next slide, please.
So this is really quickly, we went through a lot for everyone, and we really want to open it up both to question and answer. And many of you have your own expertise in lead as well. So discussion or things that you know in the next few minutes about lead or things you're curious about. We have a number of experts from all over the state who can help answer things. And again, this is just the first session. So thanks. What questions do folks have?
Rebecca, there's not a question, but there is a chat. And it just says there is still lead on the highways because the funds from the car, sorry, fumes, I'm assuming, from the car sprayed it onto the cement. So there's just that comment.
Yeah,
This is
I
like,
think that might have been like the tailpipe exhaust fumes instead of,
Yeah, fumes.
this is like when we had gasoline that included lead, then that lead was sprayed around as part of the exhaust. What people don't realize is that if you take a curve around the freeway for several hundred yards on each side, there's lead left over from that era. Most of it is now below the surface of the ground, but not always necessarily. The streets and roads near freeways still have some of that lead on it. And they found very substantial levels of lead in the yards and near the roads that are close to freeways or major arterials when they did a study of this in Detroit. That gives you an idea that there's other sources that are historic that are hiding out there that are still at risk. One of the reasons we argue for keeping a good lawn on over all your soil.
thank you. What resonated for folks, or questions that were answered, or things you didn't know about?
for me, it blew me away when she just said that boiling water doesn't take it away. As much as I think or thought that I knew about lead, and I know that they always say well, boil water to help get the water clean.
Right.
So I actually thought that it took that out also. So that really just shocked me.
Yeah, it actually can concentrate the lead, because what you're doing is you're getting rid of the water, but not the metals within it. And that can make it even worse. Like you're just drinking a more concentrated version of that, or putting it in your baby's bottle when you're making formula. If you're doing that, something like that, it's really, yeah. It works for if you have bacteria. It works to kill things like that, but not metals like lead. What other things resonated for folks?
I would just like to say I didn't, and it wasn't on my radar at all when I was pregnant, that I could even be, transmitting lead, exposing my child in utero. And that might be, an option too of what's going on. I just made my husband go get tested the other day because he works in the automotive industry. So I was like, you need to go get tested too. So especially because I'm breastfeeding, I probably should just get my levels checked to see if there's been any exposure too, because I wasn't aware, and that wasn't anything that I was even thinking about that I could be, that it would be transmitted that way.
That's a good point, Allison. And one thing to say, because we do mention that it could be, in our workplace and hobbies that we do. So the main thing to help with that is making sure that that person that works in that type of field comes home before they hug the baby, kiss the baby, give you a hug, that they kind of go to the washroom or change their clothes, and then making sure that their clothes go into a separate laundry basket. So it just gets washed separately. And they just wash up, and that's preventable, So just learning these little tips that otherwise maybe one wouldn't know, like one who has a hobby of fishing, like my husband, if we didn't know that, to like, hey, when you come home, change your clothes, because it's just a hobby, so you don't think of the tackle stuff, and the fishing stuff might have lead, so just becoming aware of it.
Yeah, if you have a mudroom, when you come into the house and from a job that might involve touching lead products, like working and changing tires and the lead weights on tires and that sort of thing, just take all your clothes off, put on a robe, and go directly to the shower. Keep those clothes outside of the rest of the house.
Excuse me.
Tanisha.
Hey, how you doing, Light?
I'm doing great. You?
I got COVID.
Oh, geez.
Oh,
sorry.
Crap. Oh, crap. But
when did you find that out?
What's today? Saturday.
I hope you're feeling better.
I'm not feeling bad. I just can't smell. But I used to work in a plant as well. And some certain little things that I always did. Number one, I always made sure I wore coveralls to work. After work, I took my coveralls and my shoes off. Before I got in the car, put them I had a bag in the trunk. And that's where I put I had a dirty bag and I had a clean bag. My daughter now works at Chrysler, so I tell her to do the same thing. But that's just something, I don't know if anybody else is in the automotive industry, but I did that for 26 years. So,
well, you're perfectly correct, because I was listening to a presentation, I believe Rebecca was there the other day, where we had a gentleman, lady, both MSU, who were giving us the results of studies And one of the key things they found was the mats in the car. When they tested them, they found, for people that worked in settings where there might be lead, they found lead there. And not always, but frequently. So those, you did it right. You got that stuff off before you actually sat in your car. And they also found lead on the child seats that had not been cleaned. And once the lead gets in the car, that dust, it just spreads everywhere. So
right. And that's when she says, I was actually surprised at the whole transferring it during pregnancy thing. Now that was a new one on me. That one was. But as far as, like I said, by me working in the plant, and I was a sander.
whoa.
Right. I was a sander and a painter. So I knew that when I walked out the door, I walked to the car, and one bag was on the left, one bag was on the right. I actually had a duffel bag with my clean stuff because it's zipped. But I had a garbage bag of coveralls. And you have to be mindful, and working in that environment, those little ugly blue bonnets that they give you, you must wear them. I know they hot, I know they irritating, but that's something that you must wear. Now that I know something about.
Yes, ma'am. One of the things I would use your comments to mention is that when people are working on their house, dry sanding is one of the worst things you can do in an old house. So if you're going into an old house and you want to get all that dirty old paint off the banister, you don't ever use dry sanding methods at all anywhere in the house that you're going to live, because that just spreads the lead dust all over the house. What you use are wet methods, where you put water or some other substance on the paint before you sand it, before you try to take it off. And so your instincts on being a sander are precisely correct.
I just want to let folks know that if you don't want to, mention your question or your thought out loud, you can also put that in the chat and share it with either us privately or the whole group.
If you don't mind, I'll share a story. Back, I had a friend who lived in Flint, and he worked at a gun range, and he was responsible for cleaning up all the shells. And he had a mental breakdown, and he had to go to the hospital because he had a mental breakdown, and his kidneys he was starting to have kidney problems. And he had an elevated blood level, like through the roof. I can't even remember. It was like a crazy number. It was like in the 200s or something like that. And he had to go through chelation to clean out his blood. And it was probably a 2-year journey for him to get healthy enough to just go back to like his regular life.
Thank you.
I want to let folks know that this is overwhelming. There's a lot of information today, and we don't expect that you're going to absorb everything here and have this. We're putting together folders, packets, binders, I guess is what they are for you, that will have other information in them about these very topics that we talked about today, as well as future ones that we'll talk about in the next couple of sessions. And so I want to just let folks know that I should have done that earlier, that we'll have more information for you, have it in a way that can be organized, where you can collect other things, and then go from there. So we'll take a few more minutes for questions if folks have them, if there's a few other thoughts.
And I think one of the key things that you're going to be empowering people with there, Rebecca, is exactly what Tasha was talking about earlier when she said during our little group that she wants to have the language to be able to talk to policymakers, because we're going to give you all the information you need to talk back to those people and make sure they listen to you. And that's one of our purposes here. I'll shut up in case somebody else has something to say.
This is Mary Sue. I just want to add off of what Rebecca said, that we're putting together binders that you should have before the next session, right, Rebecca?
Right.
And I know Allie is here from Flint. She works with schools and the Housing Commission, and she really is looking for resources. So we're going to work hard to make sure that in that packet, we'll have resources for all of you. And if you know of any resources that you think we should include, please let one of us know the best binder for you that you'll find really useful.
Right. So I think unless there's another burning question, we'll turn it over to what's next. So I do want to highlight that we went over a lot of things, a lot of tips for folks to think about in their own homes and their own communities to protect their families. But one of our larger goals is that this really, in the end, shouldn't be on the backs of us as parents, as grandparents, as aunties and uncles, and so on and so forth, to deal with this problem. This is a huge issue. If you think back to that first map and you look at all those dots across the state of Michigan, that many, many families are impacted by. And we are only able to reach a smaller subset of those through events like this. But we can reach more people if we have good laws and good policies to stop lead poisoning before it starts. So that's our overarching goal. One of the things I want to mention, and I'm going to try to share my screen here again. There we go. Can folks see the slides again? Okay. Oh, sorry. I guess we're not ready for that poll. One of the things that I want to mention is that actually, I think it's 2 slides down. Are the next events that are coming up, and then we'll go to the poll. Again, on April 15th at 5 p.m., we have our Influencing Lawmakers and Lobbying 101 session. You should have the packet, the binders that we talked about by then, so you'll have more information in the slides for that day. We are recording the presentation from today. We didn't record the introductions or things like that. So we'll also put that up on a website that we're developing for you all. And we'll send the link out to that again before that April 15th. That'll have the recording of this video, have other resources available for you. So look for that information from our team. Tanya created a couple of listserv for you all as well to message each other and to message us. And Tanya, will you let folks know how to use that?
Yes, I will, and I'll put the emails, excuse me, in the chat in just a second. But basically, what those are, you should have gotten an email, excuse me, about that last night. So the email is just LIFT, so Lift 2021 at ecocenter.org, and I'll put that in the chat in just a minute. And basically, whatever you send to that one email will go out to every participant and all of the organizers for this event. So we will likely use that to send out reminders or calendar invites and things like that. And then if you want to email just the organizers of the group, you can email us at liftorganizers@ecocenter.org, and I'll put that one in the chat right now as well.
Perfect. And then the other thing I want to mention is to mark your calendars for the Mission Alliance for Lead Safe Homes, Lead Safe Education Day. We'll have actual times for you soon when those meetings will be with lawmakers. There is a registration link that you can see here, and we've shortened that and we'll put that in the chat for you as well. I encourage you to register for that event as soon as possible, and you can say whether you're available in the morning, the afternoon, or both, just to let folks who are organizing that event, our partners, know. And we'll be able to, the event sometimes fills up, so I'm hoping that many of you can get a spot in it. It would be wonderful to share. So
Rebecca, just to add, you can join that that education day for 1 hour, half a day, or full day. So when you see 9 to 5, don't think you have to participate
Right.
from 9 to 5. You can do a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon, and legislators love to hear from parents. They listen to parents way more than they listen to staff or professionals or each other. They really perk up and listen to parents. So we hope you can go to that registration site or call one of us and we'll register you and just participate for even a couple hours.
Great. So I'm going to share a poll with you all right now. You just saw the slide for that, for you just to give us a little bit of feedback on how you felt about today's session.
I just launched the poll and it should show up on your, if you're on your, excuse me, on a smartphone, or if you're on your desktop or laptop computer, it should show up and give you a multiple choice and just select your answer. Thank you.
Is there just one question?
There's one question in that poll, and then there's a question for the chat, and I am putting that back up on the screen. So the question 2 is, you can also send us an email, but as we close things out tonight, thank you again for joining us, and let us know what are the things, some folks have already started putting those in there, you'd like to learn about next time, or over the next couple of sessions, and we really appreciate your feedback. And thank you for joining us. And it is after 6:30, and we know folks will have to hop off. So we'll leave it with these last questions, and thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I just saw a question about the link for Lead Day in the emails. It has not been, but we will send that tomorrow out to you all. Let me go back to that and put that in the chat for now.